the overall goal was introducing interactive learning. And so everything from the lecture, laboratories, but I'd say most importantly the discussion section. That previously the discussion section was a traditional discussion section where the way I describe it is that the graduate student stands at the board and demonstrates how clearly he or she understands the material.
Right.
And then students sit there and write as fast as they can what the person's writing, hoping that they can then pattern match later and see, oh, it looks like that problem. So what we did was really use the results of physics education research, which is a thriving field that started in the late 1980s, okay, that basically showed that the way we traditionally teach classes very passively are quite ineffective in actually teaching concepts. Right. Students can learn to pass tests, but they're actually not learning the concepts we're trying to teach. And that the most important thing is interactive engagement, so that they're actively engaged in the thinking. And so in the discussion sections now, they are, the format is that they are in rooms that are furnished appropriately, so that there's small tables around which 3 or 4 students can sit. They have a whiteboard and markers, and the teaching assistants are trained as learning facilitators. And so they're facilitating the learning going on in the room. So when we introduced the interactive learning in the discussion sections, there was some resistance. For example, resistance among the teaching assistants, who were really looking forward to standing up at the board and showing how clearly they could explain everything. And for some teaching assistants, they never got over that resistance, but others, it was interesting to see how at the beginning of our revamp, that kind of resistance, but then by the end of the quarter, their comments being, I had no idea what the students didn't understand before. And, that by roaming the room and facilitating the work on the materials that were provided to the students, that it was the first time that they were actually seeing how learners were thinking. And the kinds of things that they were getting stumped on, and that they would never have known that with their kind of traditional way of teaching.
So you've told us a little bit about how you promote diversity as an instructor. What about as an advisor?
Okay, so I'd say there are 2 kinds of advising that I can think of, or probably more than 2. One is advising of undergraduates, especially freshmen, in choosing majors. And that's actually something I really enjoy doing, is advising students who may be interested in engineering or physics or engineering physics. And I think a big component there is to present to them the breadth of career opportunities. Because again, students, especially from maybe first-generation college-going students, might be thinking very much about what can I do with this major. And so, for example, when we hold a dinner in the fall quarter for physics, engineering physics, and we have a BA in teaching physical science.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and with those 3, we group them together, and I always bring in the BA in teaching physical science, because I think that one of the things that is sometimes the hardest for students to come out of the closet on at Stanford is to say that they want to be a teacher. And so I think it's very important that we be presenting that as a career option along with everything else. So with the physics, engineering, physics, and the BA in teaching physical science, I present to the students that, what can you do with these degrees? You could be a physicist, you could be a researcher, okay? But you could go to medicine. Medicine today is becoming more and more technical. You could become, if you're interested in medicine, you could do health physics or medical physics and help people in a different way by developing new techniques. Biomechanical engineering, same thing. You could be a science writer. You could be a science philosopher. You could do history of science. You could teach. Okay? You can go work in industry. And just give them a long list. And then in terms of research, you could work on renewable energy. So really world problems and help the world. And I think that's so important, because otherwise, sometimes the advising students will get in some of these fields is, well, you could take physics because you could be like me.
Right.
Physics professor. And it's like, how many physics professors are there? So showing that breadth of career opportunities. And it also then gives the student the tools to talk to their parents about what they can do with that major. But then encourage them, there's so many opportunities that at this point, don't really worry about it too much, but just kind of go for the major that you're actually interested in doing. And don't worry about careers, they will be there.
Right.
So so that kind of advising, I think, is important for diversity, right? Because the ones who will most question, is this right for me? What will I do with it, or whatever, are those that may not be represented well in the major. So, so I think that those kinds of group advising things that you can kind of catch the students. Then the one-on-one advising, very important too, I think, because again, students from under-resourced backgrounds or socioeconomic classes that where they don't see a lot of role models in terms of college education will have many more questions, and one has to anticipate some of them too, or they don't know they have the question. Okay. One example is when I talk about summer research. I'll ask students, so what are you thinking of doing next summer? And this could be even after their freshman year. And they said, well, I'm thinking of going home. And I said, yeah, you know, after the freshman year, it's sometimes good time to go back to your family. It might be the last summer you're going to go back. They said, well, the year after that, what are you thinking? Well, I don't know. And then I talk about summer research and, you know, staying on campus, applying for a research program. And I remember one time I was talking to a student, and as I talked about getting involved in summer research, he just kind of sunk lower and lower in his chair and was just really becoming disengaged, and said, and then finally said, you know, I can't do that because I've got to make some money. And I said, oh, we pay you. And back then I think it was $5,000 for 10 weeks. And I said, it's $5,000 for 10 weeks. He goes, really? And like that would be more than you had been making going back and working at a deli or whatever he was going to do. And so now I realize every time I talk about summer research to the students, right away I tell them, you get paid. Now you get paid $6,000 for 10 weeks, you know, or you can do an 8-week program, so that if you feel like you need more time with your family, do the 8-week program. And sort of recognizing those kinds of things, like expectations of the family, that you actually come back a little bit more in the summer, that you get paid, you know, and not making assumptions that the students know these things. So, yeah, so I think there are a lot of ways that it can be what we don't say that is as important as what we do say.
Right, the power of that kind of information. I knew that when I was in undergraduate engineering, I didn't really know about research. I didn't know that that was something I could partake in. And so having students know about those things and be invited to be involved by someone that they know and are comfortable with, I think is really vital.
Right, yeah. And also, actually when I first got here, we were starting a summer research program, and it wasn't very formalized in terms of advising and things. Now what we do is, in January we have an advising lunch, where we invite all the students, talk to them about the program and how it works and everything, so that you don't have to kind of find out about it and know about it. And then we have a web page where we have a list of all the faculty who are interested in taking on an undergraduate, and what skills they expect, what coursework they expect, etc. So a student knows that if that person's on that list and has actually filled that out or checked off those things, it means they actually are interested in having a student. And so that reduces barriers, I think, for students who may be more hesitant about even contacting a faculty member. It's like, this person wants to be contacted. So and I felt that was extremely important that we put that there, rather than just relying on students and saying, oh, we'll just go talk to a faculty member.
That's really scary for a student to have to do.
Right, and I think that it is something that will definitely influence which students end up in the research programs.
Right,
So.
absolutely.